Well, today's episode took a little bit of a left turn that I wasn't expecting because many, many, many years ago, I did a very, very quick, terrible video on YouTube on how to change a pair of pull-ups without taking people's shoes and socks off. And you'll have to listen to this episode because you'll hear me talk about kind of what I did and why you need to go check out this video on YouTube. So listen to today's episode 120, 50 easy activities for people with Alzheimer's and dementia, a Memorial Day series, and this is part 2 on moderate dementia. Have you recently found out someone you love has dementia? Struggling to wrap your head around how to be a Christian caregiver? Searching for answers by joining countless Facebook groups but find them toxic? Learning how to cope with dementia feels difficult, but learning a Christian caregiving worldview can be easy. Hey, brother and sister in Christ, I'm Lizette, occupational therapist, pastor's wife turned dementia coach, and a daughter of dementia. In this podcast, you will learn the truth that the way to make dementia care easy is your faith. Knowing that a loving God has decreed this hard providence in your life makes all the difference. Here you will gain skills. You will be challenged by what God says in His Word about caregiving, and you will learn exactly what dementia is and is not. Find clarity and certainty from God's Word so you have perseverance for this journey. Use science-backed solutions and biblical principles to redeem your time. Praying this blesses you as we dive into dementia from a Christian perspective. Let's glorify God despite dementia. Well, thank you so much for coming back to part 2 of our mini-series here around Memorial Day on 50 easy activities for Alzheimer's and dementia people. And today's episode is about people living with moderate or middle stages of dementia. This episode is coming out on May 20th, which is about exactly a week before Memorial Day. And I thought I would share these tips and tricks with you this week so that we can create meaningful activities and make wonderful connections and memories with our loved ones living with dementia during this beginning of summer change in routine and season and busyness and travel. So thank you for coming back today. To start this episode, I just thought I would give us a little bit of encouragement, and I found this verse, and most of us are familiar with this verse from Jeremiah 29, verse 11, where he tells us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope." And so in the midst of our dementia caregiving journey, I know often it is very easy to focus on the here, to focus on the now, to focus on the challenges that we are experiencing, the stress and the struggles and the challenging behaviors and the change in our relationships and all of the things that come with the dementia caregiving journey. But I really wanted to just encourage you today, dear brother and sister in Christ, if you are listening to this, that God does know the plans He has for you. And they are for your welfare and not for calamity, and to give you a future and a hope. Our future and our hope does not lie here in the here and now, but in the future of the resurrection. And what a glorious thought that is. And I wasn't intending on necessarily talking about that much, but what a glorious hope we have in the resurrection. So Thank you so much for being here and listening today. But back to the episode where we're going to talk about activities for people living with Alzheimer's and dementia, with moderate Alzheimer's and dementia. We're going to use the same 4 points from last Friday's episode where we talked about understanding what it is, how to engage in meaningful activities, how to minimize symptoms of dementia through activity engagement, and then for fun, how we can travel well despite a dementia journey. So let us dive right in. And the first thing we're going to talk about again are my 3 buckets. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, which was 119, where we did mild dementia, I want you to go back and listen to that episode, and we'll link it in the show notes below. But when I explain dementia to family caregivers, I frequently use the analogy of 3 buckets. So we have 3 buckets. Mild dementia is in the first bucket. And we talked about that last week, that people in a mild dementia phase still have reasonable quality to the self-care skills. They don't look necessarily unkept. They're still remembering to take a shower, oftentimes manage their medication with reminders. There's a lot of just coming, independent, but with supervision and assistance for some of the higher level skills, like perhaps driving or some safety concerns or things like that starting to occur. But this person is still pretty independent when they are living with a mild dementia, and we need to remember that. And people living with a mild dementia can also have the ability to still learn new information, but it's information that they want to know and remember. It's not information that we want them to know and remember. So that's bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 is the moderate dementia stage. So here things are starting to change a little bit. Things are starting to be more impactful related to those thinking processes. And recall, it is more than just short-term memory. It is the ability to plan and manage our emotions and be aware of time and organizing and all of these higher skills that we need to be able to have developed in order to live independently. A person in the moderate stages of dementia or have lost a lot of those abilities related to those higher level thinking skills, but they still have a lot of what we call retained abilities, things that they can still do. They just need to do them differently. What kind of things start to occur with a person living with dementia in the moderate stages? We'll start to notice things like forgetting to take a shower or not being able to recall, I took these clothes off tonight and I see them in the morning, so I go ahead and put them on the next day. I don't want to change my clothes. A lot of the quality that the person had before is starting to go away. They don't notice things that they cannot see. So if something they need is supposed to be put away in a closet, they may not think to open the closet or the fridge or a bathroom cabinet to find and locate that particular item that they are needing, because they've started to lose the ability to scan their environment and use environmental cues to keep them on track. So in the moderate stages of dementia, a person is starting to have difficulty sequencing things by themselves. We all know, when you're brushing your teeth, you Everybody does it a little differently. So if you don't do it my way, that's okay. But you pick up your toothbrush, you pick up your toothpaste, you open up your toothpaste, you put your toothpaste on, and you know how much toothpaste to put on and not just squirt out the whole tube, correct? Then you need to wet the toothbrush, and then you brush your teeth, and you need to keep going more than just 2 seconds. And then you get to the end of the activity, you need to rinse your mouth, you need to close up the toothpaste, close the water, rinse everything off, wash your hands, dry your mouth, and off you go. A person living with dementia, it might look something a little bit more like this. They see the toothbrush, they pick it up. They see the toothpaste, they pick it up. They may struggle to open the toothpaste. Then when they open the toothpaste, they either put all of the toothpaste on or none of the toothpaste on. They may or may not remember to wet the toothbrush. They may just put 1-2 swipes, 1-2 swipes, and they're done, and they've brushed their teeth. They may not rinse their mouth out. So they're starting to have difficulty in sequencing routine and familiar activities of daily living. So the things that we have done hundreds of thousands of times in our life, like brushing our teeth or combing our hair. They may not comb the back of their hair because it's out of sight. It's literally out of mind. So the quality of the activities that the person is doing is starting to become less effective. So we become, in essence, their quality control. It is up to us to recognize that they have lost the ability to sequence themselves through these routine and familiar tasks, as well as that they are not going to necessarily have the same amount of quality that they did before. So we're quality control. And when we're doing activities, so since this episode this week, these 3 episodes are about activity engagement, we want to have activities be meaningful to the person living with dementia, as well as failure free. So I take on the responsibility of the quality of the activity, the quality if there is a product that is being made. By what I mean by product is, for example, a craft. If something is supposed to look like something else, it's my job to make sure that they look similar. And if you haven't listened to last week's episode, we talked a little bit last week about we have to remember what the purpose behind an activity with somebody is. Is it to engage them in their environment? Is it to make connections? Is it for making memories? What is the purpose? And we have to remember it is better to connect with the person living with dementia than it is to be right. Now, I will tell you, I struggle with that because I want to be right all the time. And so even when I think about my own relationship with my dad, this one is hard for me, guys. I will own it. It is extremely hard for me because I want to be right, especially with my dad. We have a lot of drama. My dad and I have a lot of drama. We will leave it at that. But so something else we can talk about a little bit is I can share with you, what the Westminster Shorter Catechism says about the decrees of God, how God has decreed things in his creation. It's his creation. And the answer to that is what the decrees of God, it's his eternal purpose according to the counsel of his will for his glory. He hath foreordained whatever shall come to pass. So as difficult as it is for us sometimes when we are helping people living with dementia to not feel like, why is this happening to me? This too is foreordained for according to God's will, and it is for our good and for his glory. So that was just to be a little bit of an encouragement for you today if you're struggling with God's decrees of providence, or if you're struggling a little bit maybe with the sovereignty of God, and seeing how a good and holy God can allow this particular condition that we call dementia to affect people that we love. But I just want to encourage you, just keep your eyes on Christ. I know that this can be challenging, but that's what I'm here for. That's what these short podcast episodes are for, is to try to help encourage you and to point you to the future, where we have such a hope. So that was point number one, understanding moderate dementia. So bucket number one is mild dementia. Bucket number two is moderate dementia. And so in moderate dementia, we come alongside the person and we supplement what they're not able to do. In bucket number one, this person can still do things for themselves. But bucket number two, we're coming alongside them, we're supporting them. Like the wind under some things' wings when they're flying. We are supporting that person, and we're only supplementing what they cannot do, and we're not taking things away, because a person living with dementia can still do so many things. They have so many abilities. We shouldn't just focus on what they cannot do. We should focus on what they're still able to do, these retained abilities. The second point we're going to talk about again is engaging people living with dementia in meaningful activities. Now, what are meaningful activities? Meaningful activities can be anything. We discussed in last week's episode about the fact that activities of daily living are often forgotten as an activity, as a meaningful activity. And we will start to notice people who are struggling to sequence and plan and do things. And the automatic tendency of a lot of people is to take those things away from them instead of allowing the person to still do what they are able to do. I will never forget the one day I was working in a very, very rural part of South Carolina, and there was an older gentleman. He was probably moderately, almost maybe severe phase of his journey, but solidly, moderately in the moderate dementia range. And I came to their house, and this was winter, and I'll never forget, this long, winding South Carolina road, pulling up to the house and walking in this older gentleman sitting there, and he's in his 90s. He's sitting right next to one of these wall-mounted space heaters that still have the orange glowing filaments, right? And he was fixing to go outside, and I asked him what he was going to do, and he's like, well, I have this great grandson, and I'm going to build a frame around that space heater because I don't want my great grandson coming and burning himself by putting his fingers on the heater. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So he and I go out, we put our coats on, we head out the door, and this gentleman had a whole big bunch of keys, and we go out to the shed, and it's beautiful sunny winter day in South Carolina, and he's struggling to open the lock, and he was at such a point where he could not problem solve anymore, that he just needed to turn the key around to get it in the lock. And so he almost gave up. And without asking or without telling him what I was doing, I'm like, here, let me help. And I took the key and I just put it in, and we unlocked it. And he got all of his supplies, all of his pieces of wood, and we're talking and chatting, and we come around the corner, and this is a farm in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina. And the next minute, this older 90-year-old gentleman picks up a circular saw. Now, Lizette does not know power tools. If you know anything about me, I am terrible at putting things together. Very good at pulling things apart, but not so good at putting things together. And I just remember thinking to myself, well, he's done this thousands of times before. I've got to trust he knows what he's going to do. and I will just make sure he doesn't cut something off, because if it were me, I would be cutting something off. And this gentleman, he measured stuff. He used his tape measure. He used that circular saw perfectly, 100% safely. And we put together this frame for his great grandson and the heater. And the reason I tell the story about that is because for him, that was a meaningful activity. And I know so many therapists and people who would have taken that circular saw away from him, trying to keep him safe, as opposed to walking alongside him and just making sure that he stayed safe in the activity, but allowing him to still do the task because it was routine and familiar for him. For me, I would have to use all sorts of brain power to figure out how to do that task, so it's not routine and familiar. But I want you to consider that when you're helping somebody in a moderate stage of dementia, trying not to always take things away and try to facilitate their active engagement and you just supplementing it. What can that look like? It can look like, hey, Mom, why don't you come help me in the kitchen? Here, why don't you peel the carrots or chop up this? We tend, and what I mean by we is we believe that somebody living with dementia may or may not be unsafe with a knife or a pair of scissors. Most people in a moderate stage, especially if this is a very routine and familiar task, will be pretty safe with that knife. So as long as we're supervising and watching and making sure that they stay safe, we should allow them to continue to do activities. Baking, come alongside them and you read the recipe and you just give them the task and say, here, why don't you do that? So I'm quality control, and I'm also the one that's putting together the sequence of the events. I'm not going to expect somebody at a moderate dementia level to necessarily choose the recipe, go find all of the ingredients in all of the different locations, put all of the stuff together, read through the recipe, and make the cake or bake the cake. But I certainly could expect somebody at a moderate dementia level to help me once I've taken those things out, to crack the eggs and then beat the batter, and then, here, put this in now and do that. So I'm sequencing it, but that person is still participating. And then when the results of the activity comes out, my baked cake, they have a significant sense of accomplishment, that they have done something, because we are created and designed to be active and to be participating in our environment. We want to consider things that are more sensory in nature, things that we can taste, feel, touch, smell. It starts to become more important as we're progressing through a dementia journey. And we also want to remember to try to tap into those emotional responses that a person would have. If they used to do something when they were younger that they really enjoyed, try to do some of those type of activities with them again. What, this is probably a very silly story, but I remember being a small kid playing with my dad and making, mud cakes outside in the mud. Loved it. It was, one of my favorite games as a kid growing up, right? So we want to find those memories, those emotional connections that we can make with that person, going back in their history, in their life story, and finding the tasks that they enjoyed when they were younger. They may not necessarily still enjoy the same things that they did when they were older, but that doesn't mean that they cannot still enjoy meaningful activities and be engaged. Colossians 3 verse 17 says, whatever you do in word and deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to him through God the Father. So remember that, to give thanks for these small moments of joy that you can create with the person that you love. Because if you recall what I said last time, we want to think about what is the purpose. What is the purpose of these activity engagements? It's to keep the person active, both physically and cognitively, but we want to do it at the level that they are at. We want to connect with them emotionally. We want to make memories, take photos, make videos, enjoy the process, and still live while you are going through this process. And it is possible to still make meaningful connections and have joy through this process. Then the third point that we're going to talk about again today is how to minimize symptoms of dementia through activity engagement. One of my biggest pet peeves when I was working as a therapist in home health and hospitals and all these different places would be when people would tell me, but my loved one doesn't want to do XYZ. Or I'll never forget, I showed up yet again, beautiful sunny South Carolina day, showed up at a client's house, a patient's house, knocked on the door. Sister came to open the door. This person was living with her younger sister. She had moderately severe dementia, and one of their challenges was that she said, my sister never sleeps at night. She's constantly pacing up and down. It was a second floor house. I was petrified she was going to fall down the steps. But as I come into this beautiful, beautiful house, so beautiful house, the biggest thing that I noticed and observed the day I show up is that it's 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun is shining outside. It's bright and sunny spring South Carolina, but inside the house, it looks like it's nighttime. It is dark as dirt, and the TV is on. It's huge. It covers half the building, and it is loud, and it is just extremely, extremely overwhelming to me. And I look to the person I was there to work with, and she's fast asleep on the couch because it is as all the shades are drawn, all the lights are off. It looks like it's midnight. And I just remember thinking to myself, no wonder she's not awake, because she's fast asleep in the middle of the day because it looks like nighttime. And then the other part of that equation was her sister wasn't engaging her in activities. She had an expectation, an unrealistic expectation, that her sister should spontaneously still be doing these tasks that she did before. And she had lost the ability to initiate those tasks. And so what we needed to really work on was truly understanding activity engagement is often either one of two extremes. Either somebody is not at all being engaged in any activity, they're just encouraged to watch television or sit in the dark or whatever, no physical activity engagement from other people because they need other people to help draw them into these tasks, or the total other extreme where everything is so overwhelming and so overstimulating and back to back to back to back that the person is also struggling. So when we are trying to minimize symptoms through engagement, we want to make sure that there's a balance, specifically as we're getting into the moderate and then severe dementia ranges, because the person living with dementia, they may only be able to focus and tolerate an activity for 5 or 7 minutes, and maybe the activity takes 2 hours to complete. So we want to keep that in mind, that we are only then doing 5 to 7 or 10 minutes at a time. And most activities, there are actually very, very few activities that we cannot stop in the middle of starting. We may have to stop at a certain step, but most things we can stop and come back to. There are a few things like cooking and baking and stuff like that, once the wet hits the dry, it's all she wrote. We got to get her done, right? And certain painting types of activities. So if the activity dictates the speed of the activity, then sometimes we will facilitate engagement for 5 to 7 minutes, and when they lose the ability to sustain their attention on that task again, then we can move on and we finish out the activity. And we want to remember that routine is good. A very structured routine will allow the person living with dementia to remain as independent as they can for as long as they can. But here's the caveat: making memories is better. It is better, in my opinion, to make memories with the people that you are caring for and that you love. And so we want to make sure that we are balancing the routine and familiar to keep the structure and to keep the person independent, with the novel and different and the activity to engage them and to help facilitate communication and relationship and making memories. So don't stop engaging somebody in an activity just because it is starting to get a little bit difficult or harder. And as part of today's program, at the end in the show notes, I have made for you guys another guide. It's a checklist of 50 activities for people living with moderate dementia. And it's specifically around this Memorial Day theme, and they are divided into different sections of activities. And so I encourage you to get these downloads, these guides or checklists, so that you can actually have something to look at, because we're trying to be creative and think outside the box. And so I wanted to give you some activities that you could just have some fun with this Memorial Day. And then Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 always remind us to not be anxious about anything. So don't be anxious when you think about engaging somebody you love in a meaningful activity. Just enjoy it. It is well worth making these memories with the person that you love. And then the fourth point for today, which all three of these episodes are going to be very similar, we're going to talk yet again about traveling, because traveling with somebody living with dementia is not necessarily needing to be stopped. It is definitely something that I would encourage you to prayerfully consider and look at continuing to travel with the person that you love who is living with dementia, because there is so much more benefit, in my opinion, to traveling together than there is to try to maintain a changing cognitive level. And this is a radical, radical shift from my previous views. And it took a dementia supported cruise for me to reach that conclusion. And I challenge all of my therapy friends to consider not telling people who live with dementia to not travel. I want you guys to travel. It just needs to look a little bit different. And there's four easy steps, 4 tips for you if you're considering traveling with your loved one with dementia this Memorial Day. Number 1 is you have to plan ahead. And I know I said this last week and I'll say it again next week, but you have to plan ahead. It may mean that we're not doing exactly what we've always done. We may not be going and touring Europe, but we might still go on a cruise with a dementia supported cruise where there are people who can help you through that process. Or you may want to go and get an Airbnb that's 2 or 3 hours from from your home or go visit the kid or the grandkid. I want you to still travel. I want you to plan ahead. I want you to take your time. I want you to build in more time. I want you to consider, you know, maybe not flying, but if you are going to fly, then just, make sure there's enough time between your flights so that you don't feel stressed and uh, overwhelmed yourself because of the normal stresses with travel. Uh, if you are going to use air travel, make sure that you talk to the TSA and the airports, because there is support for people living with dementia to go and make this a smoother process for us. Consider building in your bathroom breaks as opposed to expecting the person living with dementia to tell you, I need to go to the bathroom. We want to routinely just take them, kind of like when we were traveling with our little ones, when we did not necessarily wait for them to say, hey, mom, I need to go pee, where we would make them stop and we would take them regardless of whether they indicated that they needed to go or not. So we can build in those bathroom breaks. A person with moderate dementia may or may not be getting to the point where they are having some trouble controlling their bladder. If that is the case, when you're traveling with somebody with moderate dementia, put on a pull-up, put on a second one over it. The purpose behind the pull-ups is to keep the outer clothing dry, and maintain a person's modesty and dignity. And so when you then stop at a rest stop or at a bathroom, you can then go in, and if the inner one is wet, you can tear that one off and you have a second one, so you don't have to keep switching out, taking off shoes and socks and things like that. Although I do have a video that shows you how you can take off shoes and socks without, how you can replace a pull-up, without taking off somebody's shoes and socks. So you can replace a pull-up without actually undressing somebody. And I do have a video for that. That's on my YouTube channel. And I will see if we can link it in the show notes for you. It's a fun little video. I always joke with people, this is where you get to see me drop my drawers on YouTube. So if you needed a little bit of encouragement to go check out my YouTube channel, go look for the video where we talk about how to change a pull-up without taking off your shoes and socks when you're a family caregiver. So that's a fun little 3-minute video, if you'd like to go take a look at it. And then yet again, we're going to talk briefly about traveling, travel safety. As we're navigating a dementia journey, we have to recognize that the person that we are helping may not have the ability to keep themselves safe, which means it's 100% my responsibility to keep them safe. And that means public restrooms. That may mean my husband comes into the ladies' restroom with me. I may bamboozle and yell at the door and say, I'm bringing in my husband that needs my assistance if they're not family bathrooms available. I am never to be fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And I will be, when somebody needs my help, I will go into the men's restroom. I will warn the men coming in that I need to come in and I need to help this male person. Won't be the first time in my life, will not be the last time in my life. And it's just one of those things. If a person needs help, you cannot leave them in a bathroom by themselves, because they will maybe accidentally walk away. And then you have a bigger problem on your head. They make trackers for shoes. They make, AirTag trackers for iPhone users, their watches, their rings. They're all sorts of wearable technology to help keep track of a person. So if you are traveling, you have to be cognizant of the fact that even though the person that you're helping has never wandered away from home, at home, this is new and different, and they may not know what to do, and they may just accidentally walk away. That doesn't mean that you don't travel. That just means that you have to be vigilant and more aware. So those were the 4 points. The last one I'm going to mention today is Psalm 121, verse 8, that speaks about the Lord will guard you, your going out and coming in from this time forth and evermore, which also reminds us that we are to go out and come in. Continue to live through this dementia caregiving process. Continue to make memories with the people that you love. I don't remember if I mentioned, but the dementia supported cruise, the travel that I was talking about, that is in episode 98, which will link in the show notes below as well. But to recap today's episode, I just wanted to, all 3 of the episodes in the series are going to be very similar. We're going to look at understanding moderate dementia. We looked at engaging in meaningful activities. We talked about how to minimize symptoms of stress and anxiety and frustration through engagement. And then we talked about traveling, how to travel well this Memorial Day. I invite you again to download the checklist that we have. It's 50 activities for moderate dementia to help you this Memorial Day week and Memorial Day weekend, that you start to be able to just have something to at the tip of your fingers so that you can pull the person in and actually engage them in meaningful activities. And again, I just want to invite you and kind of give you a little bit of a teaser, something to think about. I am going to do a mini course. It's a very short 3-hour mini course that you can purchase and get and work through in 3 hours, that has much more information related to each of these different stages of dementia, as well as some more downloadable activities. And these are actual pencil paper activities that you can also do with the person that you're helping, that can stimulate their thinking processes, and just lots of resources for you related to activity engagement and a person living with dementia. It will go live on May 22nd, and it's only going to be available for 1 week, from May 22nd through May 28th. This is my summer special for a short little mini course to help you make your summer absolutely sensational and continue to engage your person that you're helping living with dementia in activities to keep them both engaged, thinking processes wise, but also relationship wise between you and them, as well as to create memories together. And as I end all of my programs, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And I'm looking forward to you coming back on Wednesday for episode 121, which is the 3rd part of the series on Memorial Day, 50 easy activities for severe dementia. So check out the next episode. Do you feel alone and isolated and need a little bit more help and support in this journey? Sign up for our next Ask the Dementor monthly meetup, where we will come together. Less than 10 people are allowed to sign up at a time, so we can have fellowship, where we can answer questions, where you can get some Christian guidance and just an awareness that you are not alone on this journey. I really want you to be able to connect with me. I want to be able to answer your specific questions. So if you're struggling, if you're tired, if you're overwhelmed, if you're stressed, if you just need a little bit of help, sign up for the next Ask the Dementor monthly meetup. The link is in the show notes below. Thanks for joining me today, Success Seeker. I pour my heart and soul into this program to serve you. You can serve me by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. and join our free Facebook group, Dementia Caregiving for Families. It's a positive and proactive space to navigate dementia caregiving together. Get practical tools and find support, but without the verbal vomit. Be a part of our community where we seek to find peace of mind and ease despite the dementia diagnosis. So join today and see you next time as our flight takes off.